Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, aka I've got a huge tournament update for you from this past weekend, including how a Pidgeot deck ended up going very close to winning an entire big tournament. But let's get to it right now. So we're going to start with the Pocket Legends League, and then we will talk about the Ursiiday tournament, and then I'll kind of sum up my thoughts on the current meta. But this tournament was pretty interesting because this is the first tournament that somebody decided to pilot that pretty much 19 out of 20 cards for the Pidgeot EX deck that I posted, and Ursiiday went ahead and played it as well, but she played the exact 20 and bubbled into, or almost bubbled into, another tournament literally like last Friday. So looking at this top cut, let's kind of get through the basics first. So Mewtwo ends up winning. Nothing really spicy about this Mewtwo deck. I mean, it's just typical Mewtwo. The biggest thing that was, that stood out was base Mewtwo being played in this. And honestly, like, I think that this speaks more to the fact that having a non-EX attacker in this deck might be something that is worth looking at. I've been a huge proponent of Jinx for a very long time now, since this Mythical Island meta has started. And again, looking at this, the only other thing that I look at here, and I kind of question a little bit, is one Sabrina versus two Sabrina. But hey, at the end of the day, they got the job done and they won, right? Then you start looking at some of the other decks. Greninja Farfetchd is also a deck that I talked about in a previous video. Has the highest win percentage when you take a look at the Mythical Islands meta. So again, if you go ahead and go to Limitless, you hit decks at the very top of the screen, and then you sort by win percentage, Greninja Farfetchd is up there as the #1 win percentage deck, even though it has a very small share of the entire meta and so on. But again, when you take a look at this deck list, I mean, it's just really good at what it does. The grass deck matchup is pretty tough in some cases, but for a lot of decks, it's basically just trying to rush you and beat you before you can get those big HP Pokemon out. And hopefully, even if they get them out, they're able to chip them into KO range with either Greninja or Hitmonlee. Looking at some of the other decks, again, Starmie Articuno made an appearance. Then you got some other Arcanine variants as well, some Arcazard variants, and then you have the Galvantula variant of Pikachu making an appearance. And again, like Celebi also showing up, and Executor tends to be the one of the mainstays partner wise, right? Like, we've pretty much moved past Delmice, but again, really cool to see. And let's take a look at this deck list. And this is the same deck list. Actually, this is not the deck list. My fault. Let me go ahead and go back. So this is the deck list of the Hitmonlee and the Pidgeot EX. Now you'll notice that they decided to take out red card for X speed. And again, like, the main reason why I believe in red card in this particular deck is your opponents start playing around your cards like a lot. I mean, like, they just start literally holding their hand with 5, 6, 7 cards, and basically, red card is pretty much a freebie, right? So you end up red carding them. All of a sudden, they have way less resources that are randomly, because they randomly draw 3 cards and then 1 card for their turn, and then you're still sitting there, hopefully putting pressure with either Farfetchd, or you're putting pressure by powering up your Pidgeot EX, even if it's a Pidgeotto at that time. But again, like, I do think that red card is something that you kind of have to play in this deck, and there are going to be moments when you miss that second X speed. But, honestly, like, the thing you got to realize, too, is that this deck has very low retreat cost and very low attack cost outside of Pidgeot EX, right? So a lot of the time, you're 1 energy away from being able to attack anyways. So not having that second X speed isn't necessarily a killer. But again, there are going to be scenarios where it does kind of punish you. But I think that the upside of red card also kind of mitigates some of the bad matchups, or some of the unfavorable matchups with, like, stage 2 decks that you may come across. So again, really cool to see this deck doing well, and I was rooting for this person the whole time. And then if you take a look at their matchups too, like, for example, I was on Goob's stream, and Goob, very good, right? Very good player. And like, people kind of tend to say things like, oh, they got favorable matchups, that's why it ended up winning or getting that far. And in this particular tournament, I mean, it played Gyarados, it played Mewtwo, it played Pikachu, it played Fighting Mirrors. Like, it played pretty much almost every deck except grass decks. And, grass decks do get a little tricky because of Erica and an early Executor EX. But most decks struggle with that, right? But anyways, when you take a look at the matchups here, you realize that, hey, this is a 4-1 record, right? 4-1 record against Mewtwo, which is insane, right? And then you start taking a look at the Gyarados matchup. It went 1-0 against Gyarados, or 2-0 against Gyarados, and usually you should be able to win that game. If you're able to line up Hitmonlee on Magikarp, but it's not a freebie, man. Like it's not automatic that just because you play Hitmonlee, you're going to be able to line it up with their Magikarp. It just happens sometimes. And hey, the Hitmonlee player or the Magikarp player might put it in the active and you don't draw Farfetchd. So there's all sorts of things that can happen. One of the more surprising things here is that 1-2 record against Pikachu. And hey, that's just because Pikachu can just do Pikachu things, right? It can start Zapdos against your Farfetchd, and all of a sudden you're kind of cooked. It can start Farfetchd Zapdos against your Pidgey, and you're kind of cooked. Then there's these weird games where they basically are able to dodge your Marshadows, and you don't find your Marshadows to revenge KO the Pikachus, and there's ways to lose that game compared to the matchup where fighting with Aerodactyl and Fighting Box, with Primeape and Aerodactyl and Marshadow and Hitmonlee, that deck has like a 65% win rate against Pikachu, which honestly, if you think about it, 65% with that type advantage is it seems kind of low. But anyways, yeah, that's not a freebie matchup. But anyways, that's just the tournament path that this person took. Congrats to them for doing pretty well with a deck. And again, nobody else played this deck in this tournament. They're the only person that played Pidgeot with Fighting Box in this entire tournament. So that's pretty cool that they did well. Now, taking a look at the Ursiiday tournament. So Ursiiday, the winner of this tournament was Celebi. So it's good to see Celebi go ahead and get a W in one of the bigger tournaments. Honestly, I think that this list is actually just pretty bad. And like, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I just look at this list and it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me for a few different reasons. Like, for example, the promo Snivy opens you up to losing matchups that maybe you shouldn't lose, right? Like, for example, against the fighting deck, you get your Snivy knocked out because you're playing the 60 HP one instead of the 70 HP one. That can cripple your whole strategy, right? Then you take a look at the Executor ratio. You're playing the Mythical Island Executor, and then you're playing the one Executor EX, when Executor EX is arguably like the best card in the deck. And it's just card choices like that make me like question this deck build. But it's not like to take any credit away from them. Like, if you won a tournament like that big, obviously you got hot at the right time. But it's like so worth talking about the fact that like suboptimal deck lists can just get hot and win tournaments. Like, you just have to understand, like, that's a part of the game. Like, there's going to be some major tournaments and some big tournaments where a deck like is not really good, but the player just gets super hot. And like, watching this top cut, I mean, the top four was just baffling at points. But again, when you draw your one of Executor EX in your first 3 turns of like multiple games in top cut, like, you're just better than your opponent, right? So there's that. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this deck list because honestly, I just don't think it's worth spending the time. However, when you take a look at the rest of the top cut, a lot of Mewtwo made the top cut in this tournament. I want to say like the majority of the top cut was Mewtwo. So the conversion rate of how many people played Mewtwo and how many people made it to top cut with Mewtwo was very good. Same with Pikachu. The other thing, I guess I'll mention this as well. You can look at this and see win. That's incredible. But then you realize that this person never played a single fire deck. That's insane, right? To go an entire, what is this? This is 15 rounds and completely avoid your worst matchup. So you have to kind of take some of these results with a grain of salt, right? And, again, that's not to take anything away from the player because they have to play the game and still win the games. It's not like it's an automatic W. But again, you just look at some of these matchups and you're like, well, yeah, okay, this makes sense. You avoid your worst matchup for all 15 rounds. You got a great shot to win a tournament, just to be real honest. And that can be for any deck, right? Imagine playing Gyarados and never seeing a single sniper, right? Never seeing a Zebstrika, never seeing a Hitmonlee. Like, you're probably going, almost undefeated or undefeated in that tournament run, right? Unless you just get super unlucky. But then when you take a look at some of the other decks, again, Executor, Mew, this is a popular deck list, but one of the big things that you'll notice if you go look at the numbers is you'll realize, like, hey, whenever this goes into a superior version of Celebi and Executor, the superior version tends to win. So there's a lot of factors going into that, but obviously the biggest factor is superior really changes the amount of coins flipped, and all of a sudden, both decks are healing, and then one deck is, flipping 6 and 8 coins every turn to just KO things. So that's something to pay attention to. But again, still a cool deck. And then when you take a look at the 19th place finisher, they ended up playing the Pidgeot EX and Hitmonlee variant that we've been talking about. And one of the things, again, it's the same exact deck list that we just saw in the Pocket League Legends, or the Pocket Legends League. And basically just no red card. And again, I've already said my piece about it. I do think it's worth playing. I don't think that you're going to regret playing red card in a tournament, especially when you start taking a look at like some of the matchups, right? But anyways, it ended up losing to Mewtwo, which again, if you take a look and compare it, I mean, this is like what, a 5-2 record against Mewtwo, so that's pretty solid when you combine those two performances. But again, you see 5 Gyarados matchups, and like, don't get it twisted, like 5-0 against Gyarados, that's incredible. You know what I'm saying? Like that, no matter what variant of a deck that you're playing with, with Zebstrike or Hitmonlee, like 5-0 against Gyarados, like that's a heck of a run. So I'm not discounting this run at all, like maybe some other people might. I think that's like a really good performance, regardless of, oh my gosh, you can just line up, Magikarp and Hitmonlee. Like that's not always going to happen. Like Gyarados is going to hit the board, and I guarantee you Gyarados hit the board and in those 5 matches at least a few times. Again, like taking a look at some of the other matchups, again, the loss to Pikachu, I think they talked about that loss. I don't want to quote them though. And then you see the grass matchup, they're able to win that, and then fire matchup and a random water deck with what is that, Lumineon. So again, I do think that this deck has wills, and I think that it's like definitely going to see more play as time goes on. The one thing that you'll notice if you look at this tournament, I believe when you take a look at the metagame, unfortunately it didn't do very well, and from the numbers point of view, one person kind of carried it, and then like a few other people kind of tanked it. So I know that the first 3 players were definitely real and trying to win. I have no idea about this 4th player and the 5th player, and obviously the 6th player just didn't. I believe they didn't show up, right? So it's kind of hard to evaluate how much these numbers really matter in the grand scheme of things, especially again when you take a look at like everybody's dropping. There's really like, you don't even know if these games were played. But if you wanted to kind of go ahead and factor in the numbers from these matchups, I guess you would take the first 3 for sure and kind of get a idea, and then you could take a look at their matchups and see what they lost against. But again, the matchup data is just going to be really skewed, man. I mean, it's going to be tough to really look at here and get a lot of information out of it. I mean, again, you see 1-5 against Mewtwo, but then the other person literally went 4-1, right? So really tough to take any data away. And hey, at the end of the day, one of the big reasons why I really enjoy playing this deck is specifically because, like, I think by now we kind of have an idea of like what's good, right? Like the meta for the next week and a half or however long it takes until the new set comes out, the meta is kind of like solved, right? Like we know Pikachu is good, we know Mewtwo is good, we know Gyarados is good, and we know Grass is good. And we know that decks like Celebi, decks like Arcazar, decks like Arcanine, decks like the Aerodactyl Primate, we know that they have specific matchups that target some of those decks. But again, like that's why I think it's kind of nice that we have maybe 7 to 9 days left where we get to play this Pidgeot deck and have some fun with something that's maybe a little bit out of the box, right? And looking in the future, here's what's interesting about this deck. I think that if there was a basic fighting Pokemon that had a little bit of bulk, right, and maybe could just deal consistent damage, even if it's only like 40, maybe 60, for 1 or 2 energy, I think that would probably slide right into this deck and make it better. And then the other thing that I look at is, a card that may find evolution pieces, right? Like it may be able to find your Pidgeotto, you may be able to find your Pidgeot. I think cards like that would definitely help. And then, who knows? Obviously, Rare Candy, Pokemon Breeder, like obviously you're cooking a whole probably different deck if those cards were to be introduced. But again, I do think that this deck is cool. I think that it's definitely a deck that can take down a major tournament, especially the more people that play it, because you got more of a chance to, you know, win with the deck with the more people that play it. But we'll, you know, again, there's only less than 2 weeks left of this specific metagame. So again, I hope that you guys enjoy the deck. If you got a chance to play it, and again, if you haven't played it, it's very fun. As far as like the emblem, winning the emblem, I've already made a video about that, but if you want to get that 5 win streak emblem, it's probably worth, you know, hey, tinker with this deck for sure. Grass is really good. For some reason, Ursiiday does very well in events, right? I think it's because a lot of people just randomly will bring Pikachu or will bring Grass. And Ursiiday can kind of deal with both. So that's something to look at too. Obviously, you've got decks like Mewtwo you can win with, but here's the thing to remember about these emblem events. You can win with any deck. You just have to get hot, or you have to just play very well, or a combination. So don't get stressed out about it, and good luck getting it. But again, really cool to see this deck get some attention. I know a lot of other channels are probably going to be talking about it, and it's really cool to, you know, have one more deck that, you know, I was able to put out there, and, you know, hopefully some people have some success with it. I know that, you know, Venusaur and Executor for you know, the beginning of the game had a lot of traction, and it ended up kind of falling off because of fire. But with this Pidgeot and fighting deck, you know, I think a lot of people may not even realize, like, hey, it's actually pretty good, and hopefully they enjoy it. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. But again, thank you for taking time out of your day for me to be background noise. Maybe it's entertainment, maybe you learned something, but I'm always thankful that you guys are tuning into the content, and I hope to see you around for the next one. And by the way, if you're looking forward to the next set, what I would tell you is I will be releasing kind of like a preview of like what cards I think will be coming out. Then I will release a trailer breakdown when or if we get a trailer. And then the night that the set comes out, I will be live. I'm going to try to be live on YouTube as well as Twitch at the same time, so that way we can go ahead and go through the new packs and see which pack we want to open up, and then kind of start, you know, cooking there. So definitely stay tuned for that. But thank you guys so much, and until next time, I'll catch you later. Peace.